Alright. I've had to rewrite this video like 2, 3 times maybe. And it's mostly because I didn't know how I really wanted to go about it. Hell, let alone start it. But I think I finally found what would work. So, some history behind this. About 1 year ago, I covered Yakuza 0. That is a fantastic game and a prequel to a pretty lengthy series of games. I don't know. But now we're at a weird point, because this is Yakuza 1. This is the very beginning. Like, this is the 2005 PS2 game and the remake from, like, 2016. I wanted to find a way to cover both games since they're different in their own right, but in a lot of the ways, they're kind of the same. I'm getting ahead of myself, but basically, for some backstory, Yakuza 1 was released in 2005. You know, made by the guy who made Monkey Ball. Yeah, kind of weird when you think about that, but it was it was successful enough to become a big series. Honestly, it's weird that it even gained popularity in America. Even it's pretty. It's not that well. It's well known in Japan, but like it's not one of them like big mainstay series. But it's still one of Sega's like best-selling, at least now. You know, especially when they don't use any of their IPs anymore. I don't know what it was exactly, but there was just something about it that was able to make the series what it would become and just a general identity for it. But I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself. So, contrary to what you might think, I will not be comparing or use this video in relation to Zero to an extent. I'll bring it up when I feel it's necessary, but this is not a sequel to that video or any kind of continuation. I want this to be its own thing from the start of the series proper. So, where does our story actually begin? So the game begins in 1995. The era known as the bubble is starting to die out as the new millennia rolls around. We see the city of Kamurocho glowing bright even amidst the rain, standing as the capital of pleasure and pleasure. We cut to a young upstart Yakuza, Kazuma Kiryu, standing over a dead body, which is a grave premonition of things to come, because, I don't know, storytellers love media res. We cut back to hours earlier, as he and associate Shinji Tanaka are about to collect a debt from some scumbag who's about to move ship to another town. Kiryu, not having any of this, proceeds to knock their lights out. You know, the ideal way to have your tutorial. They ultimately get the money and leave. On his way back to the office, Kiryu plans to stop by a bar called Serena, but not before being stopped by some random dude on the street. We teach him a lesson in this alley, and not long after, we get introduced to the greatest gaming character of all time in his first appearance, the Mad Dog himself, Goro Goddamn Machin. He takes this time to taunt us outside the bar, like, also right after assaulting a man, because, you know, hurting people and then talking is how things go. But he goes on about stuff like, oh, you're getting a promotion, and how now he's just like, hey, Kiryu, the girl you like at this bar, she's pretty hot. And then he leaves. Once inside, we're greeted by our brother, Akira Nishikiyama, and Reina, the owner of Serena. We also get introduced to Yumi, a longtime friend of the boys, as all three of them grew up in the same orphanage. She'll become important much, much later. So after a night of drinking, it's time to head to the Kazama family office. Yes, that's with an A, not a U. Don't get it confused. We get to turn in the money. Once we get there, we're greeted by Shintaro Kazuma and Osamu Kashiwagi, both being the head and a captain of the Kazuma family, respectively. Kashiwagi decides to flex Kazuma's successes, but there's no time to do that. Yumi's been kidnapped, and the prom's tomorrow. So we gotta go to the Dojima office and save her before she gets, well, you know. Nishiki's already on the way, but we're worried he's gonna do something brash. And we're right, because as soon as Kiryu gets there, Dojima's dead and Yumi is in complete shock. So, in order to preserve Nishiki and Yumi's safety and not risk his integrity, Kiryu decides to take the rap and gets arrested for a murder he didn't commit. Great. We then cut to a prison where Kiryu gets targeted by an assassin within. And then right after we beat him up, it's 10 years later and we find out what happens in a big exposition dump. Basically what happens is that 20 billion yen gets stolen from the Tojo clan themselves. The whole organization's in an uproar. Nishiki's now Virgil. The current head of the Tojo, Masaru Sera, is dead. Human sacrifices, cats and dogs living together. Mass hysteria! So once we're released from the slammer, it's time to head back to town as we're instructed to find a place called Stardust. And of course, since we're in prison, we have none of our abilities, cause you know, 10 years in the joint made us a fucking pussy. We end up finding the club after the main host gives us a rude entrance. Here we meet the first of many allies, Yuya and the owner of Stardust, Kazuki. They are good friends of Kazuma and willing to help in any way they can. There's no time for that. Stardust is getting invaded. So after using a busted up Kiryu to take on some goons, Shinji reappears to teach these invaders a lesson. He fills us in on some missing pieces and says that Kazuma wants to meet us at Sarah's funeral. Now we're gonna Ocean's 11 our way in, and once we do, Kazuma's about to tell us what happened with Yumi, and he gets shot by obviously Nishiki because you can see his hair, and well, you know, if you pay attention to the shit like that, it's not a surprise. Now we have to leave the building and get past the human wall known as Futoshi Shimano. This fucker is oh, he's so tough in the remake, but he's so easy otherwise. As we attempt to escape, we're picked up by Detective Makoto Date, who I didn't bring up because he didn't really have much of an introduction. He just interrogated us before. Date is able to take us all the way back to Kamurocho, and he starts to help us investigate the missing yen, Yumi, and even the corruption within the Tojo from, you know, all the bullshit going on. Right now, our only lead is Yumi's sister Mizuki, who worked at a bar known as Ares inside the building known as the Millennium Tower, right in the center of town. Can't miss it! And if we want any info, we're told to go to a place called Bacchus. There's a guy there that knows local information about all the bars in town. But once we get there, well,
we need bleach. A shitload of bleach, because we gotta clean up all this fucking blood.
Amongst all the bloodshed, the lone survivor is a little girl named Haruka, whose aunt Mizuki worked at Ares. We get her to trust us by saving a dog in the most badass way possible, and you catch it in the weirdest way possible too. And then we head off. Once we go up to Ares, it's empty, and find out from Date that Yumi's ring was found at the bank robbery site. We then encounter a man named Hayashi from a group known as the Omi Alliance. They're basically the Osaka version of the Tojo, which is just all the big organizations, or like the major families of those areas. He tries to
kill this arrogant motherfucker
and fails horribly. With no other leads, Date advises us to seek a man known as the Florist, or Kage, or Hania, depending on translation, as this guy knows everything for a price. So, we head to a place called Purgatory, which on the outside, a shelter for the homeless hidden behind the door of a public bathroom. But wait, no! The real Purgatory is placed underneath! It's a glitzy hole of sin where some illegal stuff can be done right away from the watchful eye of the law. Hell, I'm pretty sure there's some cops in here too, if I remember correctly. But once we reach the florist, his price for info is to have us fight in his coliseum. So after fighting 2 rando big guys and then the absolute unit, Gary Busta Holmes, we're able to find out about Mizuki or Yumi coming to the florist for some info. Who cares about that? Haruka's missing! It seems through camera feeds, Majima's goons have beaten up Date and taken Haruka to the batting cages. After
This is the part where you're supposed to laugh! Laugh, you stupid motherfucker!
the fight with Majima, he gets stabbed. And we get our little child back. Because apparently she was freed by some random guy. Don't worry, we find out later. After that, it's kind of filler for a little while. All that happens is that we could do a favor for the florist with the son and the Yakuza boss's daughter. Kiryu and Date find out that Yumi is Mizuki and Mizuki is Yumi after a woman's found dead. Date has issues with his daughter. Kiryu gets his tattoo touched up in an actually really good scene explaining the meaning of the dragon and Nishiki's carp. Had a very tense meeting with Nishiki as he spills all the news of the horrible stuff he did, and then he proceeds to kill us. Haruka gets kidnapped by the red equivalent of the Happy Happy cult from Earthbound. Shimano is shown talking with a new guy, Lao Kalong and the Snake Flower Triad, who's basically the Chinese mafia. And then we save Haruka from the Chinese people. Kiryu is now like wanted for arrest by a guy named Sudo, who is Date's superior. And then the end of the game happens after we leave, basically. Look, I'm gonna be honest, it's like that last paragraph I just read, doing all that, it's probably my least favorite part of the game. I just wish it was done better and connected more, but it honestly just comes off as a bit fillery. So, like, I don't know. It moves really slow and honestly made me forget a lot that happened. But the story in general is just fine and kind of in general. It just falls apart in a lot of it. But I guess that's just first game syndrome. Or you could argue that it is. And that's quite depressing, because when you get to the main plot, it's actually a very decent plot. Just the way that it's executed needed some fine-tuning, which... Semi-spoiler for the rest of the series, it improves on for the most part. But what's a good game without gameplay or substance? Well... So the gameplay of Yakuza Kiwami, much like other games in the series, is as follows. Part city exploration and minigame simulator, and part 3D beat 'em up. The shorter of the two, being combat, it's basically unchanged from the previous game we looked at, but for a quick recap, you have 4 different styles. Brawler being a basic punch-kick combo type fest, it's as basic as can be. It's your starter set of moves and probably the easiest and the one you'll use the most often because it's the weird one. But honestly, it's just too basic for my liking. I personally like the other styles better. Next is Rush, which is basically peekaboo style in terms of boxing. Bobbing and weaving all over the place, accumulating big damage over time instead of doing immediate damage. Because honestly, even when it's upgraded, you barely do a thing. The downside of this style is that, again, it's super weak and needs a lot of upgrades in order to be viable. Especially when enemies are fairly buffed up. Even on normal difficulties, you're basically a pea shooter with it for a majority of the game. Then there's Beast, which is your heavy, bulky style that's all about using gigantic weapons and large swings. And it's uber powerful. Again, when fully upgraded. Otherwise, you're just slow and clunky and not much fun at all, making it the worst style on the base. Finally is Dragon. This is the equivalent of the OG Yakuza 1 battle style, which is very similar to Brawler, but slowly over time becomes its own thing. With actually some pretty good moves. Honestly, the biggest downside is that you need heat to activate it, or, you know, a lot of the good moves. Each of these styles has access to these things called the heat moves, which are basically supers and can range from 2-second little head smash to an entire cutscene worth of attacks. My issue with combat is that you're heavily gimped here, basically a puppy without upgrades. So remember, 10 years in the joint made you a fucking pussy. But how do you get these upgrades? Well, again, like in Zero, this game steals the FF10 spear grid, except this time, you use experience points instead of money. It's still not good, but it's easier than before. The only difference being Dragon style. You unlock these moves by doing certain objectives and a certain mode that Kiwami includes. Welcome to the Majima Everywhere system. This is the game's big feature that it touts kind of often. What do I mean by that? Well, Majima's literally crawling around every corner, even story bits where he had no involvement. Like, no, seriously, he gets like 2 additions, a fight in the funeral escape and a segment before some endgame content. But if you see the mad dog walking around, it's best to avoid him unless you know you're able to beat this guy. By defeating him, you're able to gain access to some of those good moves I mentioned. And even unlocking parts of the skill tree that will get you even better moves, including the almighty Tiger Drop. Also, but, with defeating Majima, you have to do it so often that in order for it to be worth a damn, and even rank up or unlock certain skills, you have to grind him. And he gets tougher and longer to beat. Granted, you don't need the style, so like, you don't have to worry about it, but the fact that it's there and that's the requirements to unlock it, I'm not a fan. I'm gonna say it up front, I'm not a fan. And look, I love Majima. He's my favorite character ever, but I feel like this system is kind of unnecessary. Really kills the vibe of the game. Like, I'm enjoying the vibes of Kiryu and Nishiki's struggle only to walk out and see Majima in the outfit he used in that karaoke song, or he's a zombie, or a cop with a baseball bat, because the reasons? I like the idea of a rival type character to grow stronger with, but this is not the game or the way to do it in my opinion. And trust me, again, I did all of it and it just came out to be a slog by the end. But if you're bored of chasing Majima, there's also the Purgatory Coliseum, where you can engage in fight after fight, and honestly, it's just okay. That's kind of consistent for the rest of the series. I'm not a big fan of the Coliseum. Moving aside from combat, we have mini-games. A lot of them are transferred from other games, so I will speed run through those. There is poker, baccarat, blackjack, roulette, chohan, chilo, oicho kabu, koi koi, the batting cages, bowling, these painful claw machines that I hate doing, pocket circuit racing from Zero Returns, functioning the same as a man-child car building sim, shogi, mahjong, darts, going to the clubs for hostesses for those degenerates who play these games, or anyone watching who can't talk to women, that being me. And there's 2 new games for this one. And new to Yakuza Kiwami is Mesu King, which is a glorified game of rock, paper, scissors, with pretty ladies dressed as bugs. Yeah, if you played the Catfight Club in Zero, this is exactly the same game, and I still don't like it. But this time you get to collect cards. Great. I would have liked it if it was just the same game, just without the ladies. You know, quite like the real life version of the game, called Mushi King, which was also published by Sega in arcades around this time. So, for players of Kiwami only, you might notice that I left a big omission out of the minigame department, but I will get to that in a second. Let's really quick talk about side quests. The side quests, or sub-stories as they're called, they're your standard affair. Most of them are just Kiryu being conned or some kind of misunderstanding within the city. Surprisingly, some of them aren't as fun as you think. But there's some real good ones that are more emotional that I really like. Those are the best kind. Others just rehash stuff from what came before it or tied to other side modes. Honestly, if I wanted to, I would talk about my favorite quest, but I'm just gonna show on screen what my favorite ones are, and go find them without being spoiled. I don't want to spoil the surprise of a lot of them. Let's play the game. Do it. To be honest, I'm not a big fan of most of this. It's a fun game, but for Kiwami, I'm not a fan of it. Now, some of you might be confused on why this is a thing here. Well, believe it or not, Yakuza 1 on PS2 and Kiwami are two same but different games like I mentioned before. I bought and played the original specifically for this video during the initial writing process. This was after I played the remake. So let's get into the stuff I intentionally kept vague or hidden for the sake of this segment. Now, the biggest elephant in the room, the dub. You've seen me make a couple jokes of it just throughout this video, and there's a reason why. It's not a great dub, but it is the first and only, until Like a Dragon came around, fully dubbed Yakuza game.
Ow. Hey, the fuck you think you're doing? And just what the fuck family are you from, huh?
Excuse me.
Excuse you? No. Fuck you.
And it's not just some ordinary dub where they just got some nothing people. No, they got star power for no good reason. What kind is it? Well, let's start light. Mark Hamill. Yeah, no, I'm not kidding. Who else is in it? Michael Madsen, John DiMaggio, Debbie Derryberry, Robin Atkin Downs, Rachel Lee Cook. If any of those names sound familiar, then you know why this is legendary casting. I mean, come on. It's insane. But for its immense star power, what people complain about a lot with all the fucking shitting goddamn fucks and shits in this fucking shit and dub fuck shits out every fucking second.
Hey, wait a minute.
But honestly, aside from that, I mean, yeah, I find it funny, and acting-wise, they do well with what they're given and what dubs were at the time. It's just how they try and make it more edgy to appeal to the Grand Theft Auto crowd at the time. And for Yakuza, it doesn't work. And I don't have a problem with anything using those two words specifically, but like an alcoholic at an AA meeting, you gotta learn moderation. If you don't want to play the PS2 version, at least go watch the cutscenes. There is gold there, I promise you. Now on to new stuff in Kiwami. Let's start with new story content. Yeah, so if you play this game, you know that part in the beginning, in the prologue, where you gotta go find the ring for Yumi's birthday? You know, the one that I don't think anybody likes? At least I don't? Yeah, no, that's not in the original game. It was just put in to give you some comedy and backstory behind it. Give it more plot relevance. Also, like I mentioned before, Majima gets some more screen time from his 2 extra boss encounters. Because the only time you fight him are at the batting cages, and then one in an area we get to later. This is definitely not including the Majima Everywhere system. So, you get a lot of this eye-patched fucker. But aside from that, there's also new Nishiki interludes. These are cutscenes that surely show how he changed during those 10 years while Kiryu was gone. And for those going from Zero to Kiwami, this is for you. Even without playing Zero, it makes Nishiki seem like more of a compelling villain. Kinda. I think this clip I found from the Yakuza stage play signifies what his development is like with these extra cutscenes. Yeah, Nishiki's kind of a bitch. I'm sorry. It actually makes him less menacing in my opinion. Especially when you meet him at the bar and he's all cold and calculated and a little charismatic, I would say, yeah. You want to flip-flop between this personality who will do anything to make sure that his plans go through to a sniveling child who's evil because the world did him wrong because he wasn't ready. Much like another character we'll cover in the future. And oh, don't worry. Yakuza 3 fans have an idea of who I'm talking about. It also adds some relatability, I would say, since the original didn't actually develop Nishiki at all. He kind of just disappeared for a majority of the plot. He's way in over his head against this unjust world he's not ready for, which is something I can respect, but I'm not a fan of how they went about it, in all honesty. If there was a chapter of just these cutscenes, like towards the beginning or towards the middle, then I would be fine. Like, I would have little to no issue with that. Yeah, it'd take you out of the Kiryu plot, but that's okay. But moving aside from that, we got some gameplay differences. Yeah, in some areas, it's actually quite jarring. So I've been showing footage here and there of the PS2 game, and I don't know if you've noticed, but walking around the city has these weird fixed camera angles in the open world. I don't know why. But as someone who is used to fixed camera angles, I got used to it pretty quick. Next how fights play out and leveling up. In the PS2 game, you obviously have the one fighting style. And you level up through EXP and fill them up in bars instead of the giant grid. Each area needs a certain amount of EXP indicated by the number of bars needed. It's actually quite a lot easier. I was able to get fairly maxed out by the end of the game doing all the side quests, except for 2 that I missed, and minimal grinding. Which compared to Kiwami being super grind heavy, it's a welcome change to me personally. As for the minigames and side content, it's actually not as big as you think. Like there's a lot of stuff that's not in the original that if you're a fan who played from the prequel, you're going to be surprised it's not there. Certain side quests are removed in Kiwami. Some of them are my favorites. Like, there's this one where you help an artist on the side of the road by giving him stuff and he gives you a painting. There's one where you help this man stop his son's graffiti. Or, well, I mean, it's there, but it's in a completely different location. So I'm going to count it as 2 different things. I don't care. Yet they keep the side quest where Kiryu beats up a woman thinking they're a man and a man thinking they're a woman. And even adding more! Why? Also, for some reason, the training sections with Kamaki are its own side quest. I don't know why that's a thing. That just pads out the amount of stuff you gotta do, as well as the pocket circuit stuff. Like, okay. I think the one I really remember for being new is the one where, like, this lady interviews Kiryu Date and the florist about being bad dads, which the bad is an abbreviation, and it's basically just DILFs with extra steps. That one just stuck out in my mind because I remember that being hilarious because they just fought with each other. But aside from that, let's see, minigames. Only 2 minigames were removed from the original and not even in Kiwami. That being the massage parlor and pachinko. Yeah, so that only leaves baseball, the claw machine, blackjack, baccarat, and roulette from the original roster. Yeah, it's weird, right? Oh yeah, and the coin locker keys are there. I don't really mention them because they're not fun after a while. I mean, yeah, they give you some good stuff, but nah, who cares? But yeah, let's start in the original. But yeah, that means that every minigame, besides those ones I just listed, they're all brand new. Which is honestly quite a bit, and the game needed content. Except for messaging. I will never not enjoy that. But honestly, karaoke might be my new favorite thing in Kiwami. Like, this has got some good songs in it. And if you like the Yakuza karaoke songs, you're gonna like these. I've grown to love something like Restart from Tonight, and I absolutely adore Kiryu cheering in Otometo My Life. It's the only way to listen to it. Oh yeah, and I forgot Iji Sakura 2000, straight from Ishin. Wait, you never played that game before? You've never heard of it? Well, neither is RGG, because they refused to port it. Please port over Ishin Kenzan Kuroyo 1-2 Dead Souls RGG, please! Anyways, the game is jam-packed with stuff to do, so if you're a completionist like I am, which, why would you? 100%ing these is a pain sometimes. You have your work cut out for you. I don't have a transition, so let's just end this section with music. Now, I'm a bit mixed on the music between the two games. On the PS2, the music sounds a bit more grungy and dirty, I guess that's the best way to describe it. It's like you're listening to something with a seedy underbelly of the town that you're in, and I like how it's handled for the most part. Kiwami, there's a bit more variety, more techno and electric sounds, which is fine sometimes. But I honestly prefer the original. I just like how it sounds more, and it fits better, if you ask me. It sounds off for a lot of tracks. I barely remember any theme besides, like, I don't know, the battle theme, Funk Goes On, and, like, maybe two others. Which is it's a disappointment, because I really love this series' music. But this ain't it, Chief. I guess just in terms of what I prefer, I love the look of the city and the characters' faces in the original, which I didn't even mention. I just thought about that while looking up YouTube shit. But I love how cleaned up Kiwami is. You know, how new it looks compared to the PS2 game. So after Kiryu gets taken in for questioning and a pissed off Date helps us just get out of prison again, we hear of a group called the MIA, not to be confused with the MIB, the MEB, the LMNOP, but these guys are Black Ops government types led by a man named Kyohei Jingu, and they're the reason we were taken in. Oh, and Mizuki's alive. Okay. So I'll skip over the worst part in any Yakuza game. And then we return to Kamurocho, getting a call from Shinji about an informant Nishiki had. Because, yeah, we kind of forgot about him, so might as well get him involved in the plot since we're almost done, right now? We enter the florist who tells us exactly who it is, and we find out it was Reina, that bitch! She wanted the koi cock and betrayed Kiryu to get it by feeding Nishiki information and spying on it. Once we get to Serena and call her a bitch or something, I don't know, she's not there. She's on the run, promises to make things right with Kiryu. Get another call from Shinji, who is injured and on the run with Reina as she tried to kill him. Or she tried to kill Nishiki. We end up finding the building he's at through random circumstance, only to find that there's a new guy named Kazuto Arase, and he's already killed Reina. Cool. Shinji's basically on his deathbed at this point. After a fight that's much easier in the original when Kiwami made super hard, Kiryu decides to embrace Shinji as he dies. With his dying breath, he tells us to find his GF, Akemi, who he later finds out works at a place called Shangri-La. It's basically a whorehouse. But in order to get in, we gotta pay 1,000,000 yen or have a pass. Well, since we aren't made of diamond-studded dragon scales, we got a long goose chase to find a pass in. After getting the pass, we go inside for a fabulous scene of taking Haruka on a field trip. And then we make our way up to where Kemi is, and there's an exposition dump. Basically, we tell her Shinji died, rest in peace. She tells us that Kazuma is hiding on the wharf with a man named Yukio Terada, who acted to spy on Shimano. Finally, that not only is the 10 billion missing, also Sarah's will on who the fourth chairman would be is missing. But who cares about the story? We get Majima, who's driving a truck to fuck this shit up! Right into the building, we gotta fight our way out. Oh, and there's actually a really cool fight with Majima here. Yeah, I completely forgot about that. So we head to the wharf and find Terada on a yacht. Haruka recognizes him as the guy who freed her at the batting cages. You know, I told you he'd be important later. Now it's time for an even larger exposition dump. So, what happened is that Yumi had traumatic memory loss. Kazuma figured out what Nishiki actually did, realized he's a rat bastard, and decided to hide Yumi. Yumi met Jingu. Jingu did some business with Kazuma and Sarah. Then they had Haruka. Over time, Jingu wanted to have political power, but a reporter snuffed him out. Or snuffed out what he was doing and, you know, his kid. So Jingu had the reporter killed and then put a hit on his wife and daughter. Kazuma somehow finds out about this and kills the assassin and told Sarah to stop it. Jingu then laundered the Tojo's 10 billion. Yumi regained her memories and assumed the identity of Mizuki. Jingu became a threat to everyone, so Kazuma, Yumi, and Sarah robbed him and hid Jingu's money. Nishiki found out and squealed, and the rest is history. But enough of that, we get another fight with Shimano and his goons. Yeah, they're attacking the entire place, because he grew suspicious of Terada, so he decided to act on his suspicions, coincidentally being right, which normally doesn't happen. We're overwhelmed, but not before Kashiwagi comes in clutch with the rest of the boys, and we got a giant brawl on our hands. Except it's mostly just us, because the boys are actually weak as shit. Once a harder Shimano boss happens, he tells us, "You didn't win," throws a grenade at Kazuma and Haruka, ultimately killing him, while Haruka is safe. But, you know, an eye for an eye, because Terada then kills Shimano in a very anticlimactic way. With his dying breath, Kazuma tells us about how he killed Kiryu's parents and that Sunflower is a way to atone for all the families he's killed, taking the kids in, raising them as his own. Which is fucked up, but he did it out for love. He even became to love Kiryu like a real son, and honestly, that's kind of a sad thing. I actually like this scene. He gives Kiryu Sarah's will, and then we see the man bawling his eyes out as he lost the man who was basically his real father, on top of all the other people who have died just because of all that Nishiki and Jingu and Shimano and all these other fuckers have done. Yeah, I can understand that. Oh yeah, and we also hear that the 10 billion's in Aries, but who cares about that right now, man? Just let me cry, damn it! Anyway, after real sad boy hours, it's time to head to Aries for the final events of the game to go down. Not before we get ambushed by a bunch of Nishiki's men. So once we step the fuck up, it's time to die. It's a massive gauntlet of MIA agents on our way up to the top of the Millennium Tower. Date gets caught being sus, investigating files he wasn't supposed to. Suda finds Jingu's crimes and he's like, yeah, I'll help out, why not? Meanwhile, back at the plot, Kiryu and Haruka arrive at Aries, and not long after, Yumi shows up. It's a nice little tender moment of a mother and daughter meeting on honest terms for once. And these two poorly established lovers meeting, especially after 10 years, you know? It's nice. But of course, the asshole himself, Jingu, just had to interrupt and give a speech about how he wants political power and will do anything to do it. Yeah. Now he's very hell-bent in this conquest, revealing all of his crimes, including making a deal with the Omi to split the 10 billion. and basically take over the crime world from underneath them. Somehow magically hearing this, or just convenient timing, Date and Pseudo show up and announce a warrant for Jingu's arrest. Jingu's now in a piss baby rage and demands to kill Kiryu. Oh, and Kiryu reads the will and announces that he's the 4th chairman, so good for him, I guess. We then proceed to beat the shit out of Jingu and all of his boys in, again, an easier fight than the original. Fuck Kiwami Jingu. All my homies hate Kiwami Jingu. And then once we knock his clown ass down, back inside, Yumi reveals where she hid the 10 billion. Just as she does, Nishiki shows up, because of course, he's the final boss, why not? Yumi and Kiryu tell him it's not too late, but the Koi Boy tells us something about how something, if our positions were switched, would our fates be different? And then they do the big fight. Oh yeah, and 10 years in the joint made you a fucking pussy. But after that, Kiryu wins, but Jingu crawls back from the ether to shoot Yumi. Enraged, Nishiki gets his last Seka redemption arc, as most antagonists in Japanese media tend to get, taking Jingu into the vault and shooting a bomb located inside, leading to the top of the tower exploding, and all the money flying everywhere. It's money rain outside! This becomes important later, remember this. With surprisingly no one dead, at least from the explosion, we get Yumi's final moments as everyone says goodbye to her. The cops soon show up and take Kiryu into custody. Kiryu debates on going to jail again, but Date says that's stupid since he's the only person left in Haruka's life, so Kiryu basically becomes her father. Once we're let free, we cut to the Tojo HQ where they indict Kiryu as the 4th chairman. And then immediately fucks off. This is... It's a funny scene because, well, being the chairman isn't for him. So he appoints someone else as the next chairman. That being Terada. Congratulations, Terada. You are the 5th chairman after the 4th one was the guy for like 5 minutes. Once back in Kamurocho, Kiryu and Date bid farewell as we pick up Haruka and decide to leave for a better life. As a cover of Amazing Grace plays for some reason. But that ends Yakuza 1. Now, I'm going to be honest. I have a bit of a love-hate relationship with Yakuza 1 in general and Kiwami. On the one hand, it's got a solid beginning and end, some nice beat-em-up gameplay, and a couple neat world-building side quests. I absolutely adore the theme of people in the world changing, getting back in touch with reality, and even the people, despite what they may have done in any amount of time, you can give them another chance. On the other hand, it's bogged down by a boring middle part, and for Kiwami, it's in the shadow of a better game. I mean, this is literally just a mod, basically. That's kind of my biggest problem. That's honestly why I mentioned Yakuza 0 in the first place, because that's all it is. It's just a Yakuza 1 mod with the assets of 0. It's more like that game and less of the originals. So instead of forming its own identity, it just does that. As much as I love, or as much as I want to love Kiwami, I honestly can't. For every step forward, it takes a couple steps back in my eyes. Not to say the original doesn't have issues. No, it does. It's held back by a lot of the same story issues. It's very slow and clunky overall. The game's a bit dated. And honestly, it just comes off as meh. For as much as I don't like it, I'm glad that I played both versions, actually. It shows the start of a story over a decade old, introduction to some wonderful mainstay characters like Kiryu, Haruka, Date, Majima, the others, you know? Had I played this game first, maybe I'd see it in a bit more positive light. And if you like the game, more power to you. I can totally understand, but as it stands, I don't know, I just find this game very, very flawed.